Good morning. I'm Rose Kimmerer, Vice President of the congregation this year. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation. We are a religious community who commit ourselves to diversity. We hope to nourish human differences, those of gender, race, age, ability, sexual orientation, political views, culture, class, and religious belief. Welcome to all who treasure freedom of conscience in the search for truth. We promise to do our best to provide you a spiritual home. We extend a special welcome to our visitors today. We hope you follow our Facebook page. To participate in Zoom and receive announcements about special events and our religious exploration classes, please sign up for our weekly email. There should be a link in the comments section on our Facebook page where you can sign up. We do have a recent announcement, or an upcoming announcement, and there are also announcements for those in person that are printed in your order of service, and links in the UUC newsletter and weekly UU connections for those watching online today. So here's today's announcement about the upcoming harvest auction. It's harvest auction time again. Yay! Our 30th annual harvest auction, Together Always, is planned for Saturday, November 12th. The auction will open that week for online bids. How can you help? We're looking for about 2 events per month, so if you have event ideas, get in touch with us. One of the highlights is always our auction. One of the highlights is always our auction. That is true. Handmade items, fun experiences, and helpful services are always welcome. There are also sponsorship options and, of course, tickets to the auction itself. The auction will be a hybrid event this year, online via Zoom and in the UU Sanctuary. We also need volunteers, so please get in touch with Dawn Brisky, Patty Cleary, or John DeRiker. And if any of you are here, you want to give a quick wave so people know? There's John. Okay. All right. Thank you to all joining in person and online today.
My name is Karen Hirsch, and I am representing the membership committee this morning. After church today, we are offering a new to UU class for people who would like to learn more about Unitarian Universalism and about the history of this congregation. Reverend Julie Lepp and representatives from the membership committee will lead this short class where questions and discussion are welcome. We will meet in the gathering room, which is that room right back there, at 11 o'clock, and childcare will be available. And those who are watching online and who want to participate, that also is possible. For those who decide to join the congregation, joining Sunday will be on September 11 during the service.
Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Eau Claire. I'm the Reverend Virginia Wolf, Minister Emerita of this congregation, and I'm happy to be with you today here in church and also online. Today's service is inspired by Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. Our UU book group read it in March of 2021 and treasured the experience of reading and discussing it. Someone suggested to Reverend Julie that I write a sermon about it. It's worth more than a sermon. Indeed, it is a beautifully written sermon itself, well worth reading and reflection. Let me begin this service with some words from the book's preface. I offer a braid of stories meant to heal our relationship with the world. The braid is woven from 3 strands: indigenous ways of knowing, scientific knowledge, and the story of an I knew I'd have trouble with this, Anishinaabe scientist trying to bring them together in service to what matters most. It's an intertwining of science, spirit, and story, old stories and new ones that can be medicine for our broken relationship with Earth, a pharmacopoeia of healing stories that allow us to imagine a different relationship in which people and land are good medicine for each other. Come, let us look at the land as she does. Come, let us worship.
Morning, I am John DeRiker, and I'm going to read the words to Light the Chalice. And the words are by Virginia Woolf. Let this flame remind us of the insight to be found in wise books. May we gather these insights and illuminate our lives in gratitude for the wisdoms of great teachers.
So this is a story from Braiding Sweetgrass. I'm the Reverend Julianne Lepp. Pleasure to be with you this morning. In the beginning, there was the sky world. She fell like a maple seed pirouetting in the autumn breeze. A column of light streamed from a hole in the sky world, marking her path where only darkness had been before. It took her a long time to fall. In fear or maybe hope, She clutched a bundle tightly in her hand. Hurtling downward, she saw only dark water below. But in that emptiness, there were many eyes gazing up at the shaft of light that was coming down. They saw there a small object, a mere dust mote in the beam. And as it grew closer, they could see that it was a woman, arms stretched out, long hair billowing behind her as she spiraled towards them. The geese nodded at each other, and they rose together from the water in a wave of goose music. She felt the beat of their wings as they flew beneath her to break her fall. Far from the only home that she'd ever known, she caught her breath. And she was in the warm embrace of soft feathers as they carried her gently downward. And so it began. The geese could not hold the woman above the water for much longer, so they called a council to decide what to do. Resting on their wings, she saw them all gathering, loons, otters, swans, and beavers, fish of all kinds, and a giant turtle floated in their midst and offered his back for her to rest upon. Gratefully, she stepped from the goose wings onto the dome of his shell. The others understood that she needed land for her home. They discussed how they might serve her need. The deep divers among them had heard of mud at the bottom of the water and agreed to go find some. Loon dove first, but the distance was too far, and after a while he surfaced with nothing to show for his efforts. One by one, the other animals offered to help. Otter, beaver, sturgeon, but the depth, the darkness, and the pressures were too great for even the strongest of swimmers. And this was adapted from oral tradition by Shenandoah and George. And it's only the first part, so stay tuned. Reverend Virginia gave me more. Now's the time in our service where we share of our abundance with others. Our 50-50 Share the Plate is the Chippewa Valley LGBTQ Center, and it's right around the corner here. There is an LGBT youth group, there is a transgender support group, a transgender parent support group, so many outreaches and advocacy into the community. With gratitude for the abundance in our lives, we give to help people in need and to support the work of this congregation. A greeter will come around with a basket if you're in person. If you're online, you can donate online or text to give and indicate whether it's for pledge or some other fund. Thank you so very much.
For we can see divinity
Thank you to Laura and Jennifer. If you'll please join me, and especially to Jim Hepner too. Please join me in the words for congregational response. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. And now is the second part of the story. Okay. They returned, gasping for air with their heads ringing. Some did not return at all. Soon only little Muskrat was left, the weakest diver of all. He volunteered to go while others looked on doubtfully. His legs flailed as he worked his way downward, and he was gone for a very long time. They waited and waited for him to return, fearing the worst for their relative. And before long, a stream of bubbles rose with the small, limp body of the muskrat. He had given his life to aid this helpless human. But then the others noticed that his paw was tightly clenched, and when they opened it, there was a small handful of mud. Turtle said, "Here, put it on my back, and I will hold it." Sky Woman bent and spread the mud with her hands across the shell of the turtle. Moved by the extraordinary gifts of the animals, she sang in thanksgiving and then began to dance. Her feet caressed the earth, and the land grew and grew, and she danced her thanks from the dab of mud on the turtle's back until the whole earth was made, not by Sky Woman alone, but from the alchemy of all the animals' gifts, coupled with her gratitude. Together they formed what we know today as Turtle Island, our home. Like any good guest, Sky Woman had not come empty-handed. The bundle was still clutched in her hand, and when she toppled from the hole in the sky world, she had reached out to grab onto the tree of life that grew there, and in her grasp were branches and fruit and seeds of all kinds of plants. So she scattered them onto the new ground and carefully tended each one until the world turned from brown into green. Sunlight streamed through the whole of the sky world, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, and other medicines spread everywhere. And now that the animals too had plenty to eat, many came to live with her on Turtle Island. The end. Or the beginning.
As you probably realize by now, I'm in love with Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass, one of the wisest and most beautiful books that I've read in a long life of reading. In wonderfully evocative words, metaphors, and stories, she braids together her experiences as a member of the Potawatomi Nation, as a botany professor, as a mother, and as a poet storyteller to explore our relationships with the earth and with each other. Kimmerer is a dedicated and devoted scientist and ecologist who understands both the benefits and the limitations of science. She addresses the apparent conflict between religion and science, concluding that they serve different purposes. Religion answers the question, "Who am I?" Science, the question, "What is it?" The former deals with questions of the heart, the latter with questions of the head. She provides a moving story to explore this difference. When she began college, she told her advisor that she wanted to be a scientist so that she could understand why asters and goldenrod look so beautiful together. And he told her that science did not deal with such questions. She, of course, learned in her studies that yellow and purple oppose each other on the color wheel as complements, which accounts for why these flowers growing together stand out so vividly for the eye. As this anecdote suggests, She faults science for its tendency to focus on division and separation, to see non-human beings as things, setting up an inherent conflict between us and everything that is not us, in which we are the superior beings who are to control nature and therefore have a right to use and abuse it as we wish. Increasingly, of course, since the 19th century, industrialization and technology have made it possible for us to damage or destroy all kinds of species, even air and water. Interestingly, Kimmerer credits the Judeo-Christian tradition with both the scientific attitude toward nature and with consumerism, both of which have contributed to the climate crisis that we now face. She compares the story in Genesis with the story of Sky Woman. Eve, of course, took the apple and was shut out of the garden, cursed with the need to labor and struggle with nature to survive. This is a story of separation from and of conflict with God and the natural world. It's also a story of lack and the need to grasp after what is needed. Adam is, as we all know, given dominion over earth and told to name the plants and animals. Sky Woman, on the other hand, brought all the gifts of Sky World to our planet and gave them freely to all living beings, who in cooperation with her and each other provided the soil that covers the planet, which nurtured the seeds which she brought. This is a story of abundance, of giving and reciprocity, of mutual respect, of interdependence. It demonstrates that all flourishing is mutual. There's no sense of separation or scarcity, which of course drives our consumer culture. Believing we are separate individuals in competition with each other for limited resources and driven by fear of not having what we need, we are consumed by constantly wanting more and of fearing we won't have enough. Our culture is set up on a scarcity model. I especially love Kimmerer's succinct summary of the difference between science and her indigenous faith. Studying science, she says, she learned names, but not songs. Science turns plants into things, not subjects. It attempts to learn about, not from them. For her, strawberries, maple trees, corn, squash, beans, lichen, drops of rain, her pond, witch hazel, water lilies, black ash, leeks, the swamp, salmons, cedar trees, and especially sweetgrass are living beings. They deserve our respect, attention, and care in reciprocity for all that they give us. She writes a whole chapter about each of these beings, lovingly giving us the details she knows about them as a scientist and as an indigenous person. She evokes each as a subject to be in relationship with. For her, it's all about mutuality and the flourishing it enables. She argues for a democracy of species and identifies the species' loneliness resulting from our belief that we are superior and separate. But mostly, she brings each alive for us. Let's listen to her song about raindrops. Maybe there is no such thing as rain. There are only raindrops, each with its own story. Listening to the rain, time disappears. If time is measured by the period between events, alder drip time is different from maple drip. This forest is textured with different kinds of time, as the surface of the pond is dimpled with different kinds of rain. Fir needles fall with high-frequency hiss of rain. Branches fall with the blink of big drops, and trees fall with a rare but thunderous thud. Rare unless you measure time like a river. And we think of time as if it were one thing, as if we understood it. Maybe there is no such thing as time. There are only moments, each with its own story. In this chapter, Witness to the Rain, she searches like a scientist for understanding of why drops on cedar's moss are bigger than others, and comes up with various hypotheses. Eventually, after very careful observation, she sees that there are different kinds of drops depending on the relationship between the plant and water. Here again, we see her emphasis on mutuality. But clearly, this is not just a chapter by a scientist. It's also a story about her personal experience as she carefully attends to what she encounters. Such careful attention is the essence of love. Attending, she discovers relationships of hers to the rain, of the drops to the plants, and of the moment to time. And the discovery opens her to the awe and mystery of life. Every chapter of this book exhibits such mindfulness, caring, curiosity, relating, discovery, and awe. Nevertheless, this is not a book that ignores suffering. We hear about the genocide of her people, of the Indian boarding schools that nearly extinguished children's memory of their native culture and language, of the Trail of Tears, of the pollution of Lake Onondaga, the clear-cutting of forests, the loss of species. She grieves what we have done to her people and to the earth. But although she holds us responsible, she does not rage at or blame us. She sadly understands why we have gone wrong and offers a different kind of relationship to the earth as a way of saving ourselves and other species from loneliness, consumerism, and possible extinction. I thought about calling this piece a theology of kinship, for that's what's implied in her repeated assertion that all flourishing is mutual. Also, in her recent speeches, she emphasizes our kinship with each other and with our non-human relatives. As she shows over and over again in this book, we are all intimately and intricately intertwined and interconnected. Our existence depends upon the existence of other species. Feeling separate results in conflict, loneliness, and abuse. Engaging in caring, respectful relationship brings peace, companionship, responsibility for our part in the relationship, and a sense of awe and mystery in the presence of the abundant gifts the earth provides. Repeatedly, she stresses that such abundance requires our gratitude and our best efforts to provide the materials and labor needed to ensure that this flourishing continues. These efforts require our understanding how much to take and when to take it, understanding of what she calls the honorable harvest. This involves waiting until plants are fully mature or the right deer comes along, never taking more than your share and never more than half of what's available, being respectful of plant or animal, asking permission, thanking for their gifts and not wasting anything. Unlike some scientists, she believes that harvesting, if honorable, helps plants and animals, preventing death by overabundance and maintaining balance. Like tending nature to ensure its growth, honorable harvesting ensures the survival of species. It maintains the balance of nature, or to put it another way, all flourishing is mutual. Implicit in this recognition is another truth. Our lives depend upon the deaths of others. In her words, everything we use is the result of another life. Knowing, quote, that a life has been given for yours, end quote, humbles, evokes gratitude, restraint, and a need to reciprocate. Waste, like junk mail and food thrown out at restaurants and grocery stores, becomes a horror. Even more significant, recognizing the cycle of life changes our attitude toward death. We cannot fail to see how essential death is to life. If others are to live, some must die. Overpopulation by humans consumes too much of this planet's limited resources, just as overabundance of sweetgrass chokes out the life of the plot. Honorable harvesting is necessary for the health of the whole. Kimmerer sees that in our age, creation and destruction are out of balance. She identifies the source of this imbalance in her story of the Wendigo. The essence of this monster is a hunger that will never be sated. Wendigo, she writes, is the name for that within us which cares more for its own survival than for anything else. It consumes everything in its path without regard for what it is. In her words, this monster was created in stories that we might learn why we should recoil from the greedy part of ourselves. That is why the Anishinaabe elders like Stuart Green reminded us to always acknowledge the two faces, the light and the dark side of life, to understand ourselves. See the dark, recognize its power, but do not feed it. Writer Steve Pitt states that a Wendigo was a human whose selfishness had overpowered their self-control to the point that satisfaction is no longer possible. In the many addictions of our time, we see that Wendigo is alive and well. In our overconsumption, we see that we are a Wendigo culture. In our former president, we see the embodiment of the Wendigo. Defeating Wendigo is the last chapter of the book. Here, Kimmerer tells us that Wendigo will eventually kill itself, but before it dies, it will take so much that we love with it. In other words, greed may destroy us and many other species. Kimmerer recognizes that we need to change destructive economic policies to end this threat, but we also need changes to the heart. In her words, we can reclaim our membership in the cultures of gratitude that formed our old relationships with the living earth. Gratitude is a powerful antidote to Wendigo psychosis. A deep awareness of the gifts of the earth and of each other is medicine. To embody what she means with these words, she tells a beautiful little story about how she defeats Wendigo, at least in her imagination, with the help of nature. She tells of how she gathers invasive plants and creates a tea which empties out the monster. Then she offers it a tea of all the plants that she wrote about in this book. And I'm quoting, of willow to quell the fever of want, and strawberries to mend the heart, with the nourishing broth of the three sisters and infused with savory wild links. The medicine enter his bloodstream. White vine for unity, justice from pecans, the humility of spruce roots. He drinks the compassion of witch hazel, the respect of cedars, a blessing of silver bells, all sweetened with the maple of gratitude. You can't know reciprocity until you know the gifts. He is helpless before their power. But she says this is not all the medicine. Also needed is her telling the story of Sky Woman. And so we come full circle to the story with which she begins the book, showing that mutuality among all living beings generates an abundance of gifts, gratitude, and a desire to reciprocate. For her, writing, gardening, the honorable harvest, science, ceremony, and caring are all forms of reciprocation. Together, they promote careful attention, gratitude, tending to the needs of nature, and recognizing that nature has much to teach us and has her own methods of healing. Ultimately, she sees that nature is wiser than we, the younger beings, who were, after all, the last to appear upon earth. In time, earth will heal herself. The earth will survive, but will we? Her answer is that we will survive only if enough of us have a change of heart or perception. Many see this change as rapidly happening. Joanna Macy calls it the great turning, the shift from an industrial growth society to a life-sustaining one. Myths of objectivity, of science as the only source of truth, of the division of human from non-human, and of the superiority of humans are disintegrating. Myths of mutual dependence, interdependence, the wisdom of nature, the importance of mystery and awe gain power. Something is happening. Many see it as a religious turning away from monotheism and the separation of God from man and man from nature, and toward an understanding of our thoroughgoing, entwined interdependence. Clearly, Robin Wall Kimmerer offers indigenous beliefs as an alternative to monotheism. She stresses seeing ourselves as part of the whole and not as separate. Braiding Sweetgrass offers not only a scientist's view, but also that of someone who deeply loves the earth and who believes that the earth loves her back, offering her an abundance of gifts and inspiring her to give back. She sees herself as in relationship with all of Earth's beings, receiving and giving, sharing. And so in the epilogue of the book, she celebrates the Indian giveaway ceremony, all gifts piled high in the center, everyone taking one, knowing that a gift is never for keeps, but meant to keep circulating in the web of life. The ceremony, she says, celebrates, quote, that the earth is a gift that we must pass on just as it came to us. May we feel the earth's love for us and love her back. May we play our part in the giveaway and in the great turning. Let it be so.
Please join to me in reading the words from the service for extinguishing this chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we meet in our hearts until we are together again.
Let's close with the last words of Braiding Sweetgrass. It's our turn now, long overdue. Let us hold a giveaway for Mother Earth. Spread our blankets out for her and pile them high with gifts of our own making. Imagine the books, the paintings, the poems, the clever machines, the compassionate acts, the transcendent ideas, the perfect tools, the fierce defense of all that has been given, gifts of mind, hands, heart, voice, and vision, all offered up on behalf of the earth. Whatever our gift, we are called to give it and to dance for the renewal of the world. In return for the privilege of breath. May we all do our part in this giveaway. Go in peace, go in love.